I've made it no secret that I'm not super hyped about Avowed, but I've got to say I'm doing a bit of a rethink after the Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2 gameplay trailers came out recently, because from an RPG perspective, they were absolutely pathetic, and at least Avowed sounds like it's trying to be a Western RPG, so I'll give them some credit for that. I've always kind of said that with Avowed, there's nothing specific, I don't think, that is making me dislike it. It's more a combination of everything. It feels like an RPG that started development 2018, 2019, and it was designed for that sort of era where Western RPGs, they felt dead in the mainstream. Everything was becoming a live service, or RPGs were becoming action games disguised as RPGs, and we were just never going to get something that wasn't dumbed down again. But then titles like Baldur's Gate 3, even indie titles like Disco Elysium, plenty of others, they sort of paved the way for something richer. RPGs that did much more. So seeing Avowed, it's just hard to get super pumped about it. When the Outer Worlds came out, people were alright because, hey, what else was there? We were getting Fallout 76, those sorts of games. But we're just in a different era now. So I've never been too pumped for this one, especially after the recent footage. It just seems like Obsidian keep talking about what we're not going to be getting. We aren't going to be getting Baldur's Gate-style companion systems. There's only 2 races. Calm your expectations. They're not really getting out there and saying, hey, you're going to be able to do this. This is going to be really exciting. Pre-order the game because of this reason. Not that I believe in pre-orders, but I should at least be sort of excited. They should be trying to convince me. They're not really doing that. However, there's been a few more articles that have come out. I'm going to try and be fair because I hope we get some surprises this year. It's getting a bit depressing when we see things like Bloodlines 2, and while there's some games, Dragon's Dogma 2, I'm not really feeling it from that Western RPG perspective at the moment. Indie games, there's plenty of fantastic ones, but they can always run into trouble. The teams working on them, they've often got other jobs, projects can fall apart, so I'd like to see an era where we get some decent mainstream games, plus all the indie ones on top of that. So we'll see what happens with Avowed. I did see this though, and I'm reading these articles off forums because we don't get the ads, they're annoying. But it says here, Avowed is a fantasy RPG with open zone maps, unique local conflicts, companions to meet. It's still the player's story, first and foremost. Now, open zone maps kind of interesting to me because there's always been this issue with Avowed where Obsidian originally pitched it as their Skyrim, and then they kind of walked that back. It sounds like they had development issues, gameplay directors they changed, all of that sort of stuff. And we went more towards hub worlds, like in the Outer Worlds. We weren't going to have the full-scale open world. That's okay. I've kind of moved on from that. My issue has always been not that it has to be open world. I think some of my favourite games are not open world. That's not the issue. It was just that if the reason they had to scale it back was because of development hell, what's going on? Is the game going to be a bit of a mess? Is it going to be half-baked? When they say open zone map, though, does that mean it's just another world for hub worlds and they're just trying to do marketing speak? Or does it mean something else? Is it like we get 3 genuine open worlds, they're just a bit smaller in scale? It could be possible, because, I mean, if I've gone through, say, screenshots of some of the trailers from recent past, so most recently and also in 2023, these are screenshots from the older trailer from around 7-8 months ago, and you can kind of see in these grassy areas, it does kind of feel a bit more open. So I'm kind of curious about this. This could be an older build, who knows if things have changed. But you just sort of get the feeling that it is a bit wider. It is sort of going to have more of that sprawling world you might expect when they were trying to go for a Skyrim-like. So maybe some remnants of that are there. I still think if you have open areas, you've got to get the exploration right. There's got to be a reason to go places. And one of the reasons I love Baldur's Gate 3's success is that kind of has these open areas. What was that phrase again? Open zone maps. That's kind of what Baldur's Gate 3 is, where everywhere on the map, it has a purpose. It doesn't matter where you go. You don't want to miss anything. Even in, say, the Baldur's Gate city, you want to go down every possible alley, every possible street, because if you don't do that, you're very likely going to miss something. compared to, say, a mainstream open world game, an Assassin's Creed, even Witcher 3, if we're going to be honest. If you go to a city, you don't really need to explore every little part of the map, because it's just going to tell you on the mini-map, question marks, points of interest. It kind of directs you to where everything is. Whereas the Baldur's Gates of the world don't do that. You really have to explore everywhere. So I hope it is the case in something like Avowed. I wasn't quite feeling that with the Outer Worlds. So, I mean, there was some things to explore on the map, but it wasn't that rich. There wasn't sort of that much to do. I just didn't really feel like I needed to explore everywhere, whereas a Baldur's Gate or the older Gothic games, for instance, you had things like resources you needed to find. How cool is it to find like a scroll of resurrection or whatever they call it in Baldur's Gate? Because that's a really important resource. Some of Obsidian's games haven't really needed that sort of stuff. And even New Vegas, the open world is solid enough, but it really is about the settlements and the points of interest. And I hope Avowed, they can get the exploration right. I haven't been seeing it in what they've shown so far. They've sort of dropped the ball, because this is a screenshot. It's not the highest quality here, but this is from the most recent trailer, and it just feels like more of an enclosed area. And it feels purely like a combat romp, like you're just going to be killing these enemies, which they really pushed in the recent trailers. It's all about the combat, not a lot going on from the narrative perspective, exploration I could really see. And that's what worries me. I feel like, once again, every time they've shown this game, hype's just worsened. The initial reveal trailer, it was pretty dark, it had that sort of art style, and then it got light up, fluffier. And then we get this, where it was like purely combat, except for one lane quest with lane characters, it looked like. And they really need to pick up their game. I think we're just really in an age where you need to actually produce something great for it to sell gangbusters. You can't release something middling and it'll be okay. It's like with movies, with all the Marvel titles kind of failing, and it's only the movies that people treat like a massive event, like the Oppenheimers or the Super Mario Brothers movie, which was just kind of creating that impact that gets people to get out and spend money. Games are the same. Hogwarts Legacy, it just had so much momentum behind it. Again, Baldur's Gate. These titles, there's got to be something about them to get you to jump in. And Avowed definitely does not have that at the moment. The people praising it, again, it's mostly people who already like Obsidian. Maybe they like the Outer Worlds, but then they can't really tell you what they love about Avowed. It's sort of other things in the background that get them talking positively about it. But if we jump back to this, the talk about these open zone maps. So Kerry Patel, the game director, says, "Open zones allow us to create a strong sense of place in each of our environments. All of our regions have distinct aesthetics and atmospheres, as well as unique local conflicts and narratives that build towards the larger, grander story that the player is at the center of." Now, I just wish they would give us some real details, because again, when they've given us proper details, it's basically been saying you can't do this, or this feature won't be in the game. But when they're talking about good things, it's just really generic. Yeah, okay, narrative, local conflicts, what? Like every RPG of all time. You need to tell us something specific. Now, they do talk about companions here, and they say each companion has a role in the party if the player wants them to, says the gameplay director Gabe. He goes on to give 2 examples. Kai is a tank and can taunt enemies, causing him to take aggro, or Giada can heal the party when you want her to. So sort of basic things, it sounds like. I doubt you need these companions, and again, it seems like you can have one at a time, really similar to the Outer Worlds. Everything they say, it just comes back to the Outer Worlds, and that's why this game kind of feels safe. Like the Outer Worlds, yeah, it wasn't like the biggest success ever, but it wasn't a failure. And rather than maybe take some risks, try and innovate somewhere, it's like, let's just make fantasy Outer Worlds. We tried to do Skyrim, that was too hard. We're going to go back to the Outer Worlds. It even mentions here, I'm not sure if it was a direct quote, but that Patel, the gameplay director, had previously said that Avowed's combat is more like a fantasy Outer Worlds, despite the Skyrim comparisons. I can't remember seeing that quote, but if they actually described it as fantasy Outer Worlds, that's what I really just thought the game would be the second they walked back the Skyrim stuff. As soon as they said it was Hub Worlds, it's like, yeah, this is just going to be the Outer Worlds 2.0. It's just going to have that Skyrim or Pillars of Eternity skin. It's fine, but again, there's just been more exciting games since the Outer Worlds. So I just don't really see who's going to get pumped about that. And if we move on here, again, when I speak about how they just keep talking about what's not in the game, there's so many articles about this, but it's weird because the articles, they're not really hit pieces. People aren't out to hate on the game. A lot of these articles are actually defending Obsidian, so it seems like the IGNs or whatever, they do want to suck up to Microsoft to an extent, but they don't have a lot to kind of work with. For instance, we see here, Obsidian explains why Avowed won't let you romance your companions. The developer wants to focus on thoughtful relationships, which means basically nothing. Again, the generic terminology, it's not doing them any favors, because anyone who's going on the internet to look up information about the game, we're not talking about just a normie who buys it if it looks cool, or they're just looking for a role-playing game. Does it have positive reviews on Steam? That's just their thought process. They don't care about doing research. That's fine. But the people who are looking this up, they're not just going to be convinced by generic terms like player choice. We want you to be in control. That's not enough. We want some sort of specific details here. And I saw a good comment the other day about how Elden Ring, for instance, when they were marketing that, it was not all talk. It was like, here's 20 minutes or so of just genuine gameplay. We're going to show you the cool stuff. That's it. Whereas with Obsidian, so many articles about what's going on, but when they show you the gameplay, it's just like a pretty ordinary combat section, and then like half a quest where it's like, let's teleport from one quest giver to the other. Why couldn't you just play out the quest as normal? Show us the combat in an uninterrupted sequence, show us the quest, have it play out, and then show us the consequence at the end. You mentioned that you could give the NPC the badges or not, and that could result in something happening. Show us the outcomes. That could get people talking. It could be kind of cool. They just didn't do that. So again, this article is saying you won't be able to do this. You can't do this. And it happens again. Obsidian explains why Avowed only lets you pick human or elf. Aora may be diverse, but Adia is less so. And then there's some sort of like lore reason for why it's the case. No one gives a toss about that. You're just making a game where there's two options. That's all 99% of people are going to be. Some nerd on the internet going, oh, no, but if you look at the lore of Aora, no, you can only have two in this specific area. It totally makes sense. The average player does not give a toss. You've just limited the choices, the game looks worse for it, and no one's going to be talking about it in a positive way. It's not going to get out into the mainstream. Baldur's Gate, again, I get sick of using it as an example, but because it's just so mainstream, it's easy to use, it's accessible to everyone. Just all those different choices you can make. It's not even about the average player is going to go in and utilize all of those choices. They're going to make 10, 15 different characters and make the most of it. It's just perception. I remember Larian talking about how they were kind of disappointed that even though they made all of these races available, everyone just goes for the generic warrior human, at least for the most part. That's what the stats said. But it doesn't really matter, because there's just something about knowing that you can go in these different directions that's cool. It gets people talking, and that creates a popular game. It's always that perception. It's not necessarily that everyone is going to take up all of those choices, but knowing it's possible, it just gets people pumped, and that gets people to buy it. Whereas Obsidian are just not doing that. They're not creating that buzz. It's not quite working for them. So again, just articles about how you can't do this, you can't do that. And we can see here from yesterday, this is the one exception, and it doesn't really give me hope, but at least it's a step in the right direction, and they need to be doing more of this. They've got to be getting the word out about the good things. So they mention here, Avowed developers confirm that the game has multiple endings. It's an Obsidian game. If everything played out exactly as you expect, it could feel a little boring. So why weren't you talking about things like multiple endings immediately? Why are you talking about all the bad stuff? Once again, it's not like these article writers are just going out to do hit pieces and they're trying to make the game look bad. I see Xbox fanboys, they always jump to that defense. Everyone's against Xbox. I'm here to defend the multi-billion corporation. I think maybe even $1 trillion. I might be underselling that. But they're not trying to hate on it. It's just Obsidian have just said all the wrong things. They just seem to suck at the marketing. So this is a little better. Multiple endings. That's a good thing. Hopefully it plays into choices you actually make throughout the game. It's not like a couple of half-hearted decisions at the very end. Hopefully your progress, the roads you go down, they have some sort of impact. And the game director, when asked about these endings, she mentioned Avowed will indeed have multiple endings, obviously. I mean, it's an Obsidian game, she says. What else would we be if we didn't have a few different endings? So there's at least a few, it's not a couple. That is basically confirmed. And in terms of players maybe not seeing everything in one playthrough, she mentions you have to approach this with a degree of range, both in the spread and placement of those consequences, and also the nature of those consequences. Some things need to have surprising but believable outcomes. If everything plays out exactly as you expect, it could feel a little boring. I mean, these sentences are a bit boring. Again, I want to hear specifics. Give examples of something that happens in the game, because otherwise it seems like this is your design philosophy, but have you actually put that in the game yet, or are you still working on it? At the same time, not every quest needs to have world-ending consequences. Some absolutely do have huge impacts for the characters in the world around you, but sometimes the story you're experiencing is just a very deeply personal one for the characters involved, and that's okay too. Sure, it's fine for the characters just to have that development. Their companion questline doesn't have to change up the entire story of the game. It might just be for them. That's fine. From a practical level, maybe it results in a nice reward, a nice weapon or upgrade for the companion. They get stronger, that sort of stuff. Maybe you can make a choice around that too. They get an upgrade that makes them much stronger, but maybe every 10 minutes they have to have a rest and you lose them for a period of time. Or you can choose an upgrade that makes them a little bit stronger, but you don't sort of get that pro and con of they're being way stronger but having the drawback. So maybe just little things like that. Again, they're not really saying too much. They're doing a lot of interviews at the moment, but it seems like they don't have a lot to really tell. They've mentioned the multiple endings. That's a good thing, but I'd like to see more examples. It seems weird that it's releasing this year and they don't have footage. But once again, I just don't know, because 2024, it's probably not going to be like 2023, where quite a few RPGs came out, lots of other good games. I'm sure there'll be some decent ones this year, the indie scene's being solid. There is a game, for instance, coming out later this month. I believe it's called the Thaumaturge, it's something like that, but it looks quite cool. It's got a nice aesthetic. I'll link it in the description, and I might speak about that later. But if you're disappointed by the Bloodlines reveal, this game might be good. It's actually the studio also making the Witcher 1 remake, so they seem to be a well-oiled machine if other publishers are taking a chance on them. They're releasing a proper CRPG at the end of Feb, and then they'll be moving on with The Witcher from there. So hopefully some good stuff comes. I hope Avowed can at least surprise us. Again, I'm not hating on it for the sake of it. There's just things I've seen that are not very good, and they need to turn this around, because even the people who were loving it maybe last year and they were getting excited, they seem to have sort of withered away to some extent. So they need to get back into the studio, and if they actually have good things, if that's genuine, it's not all talk, they actually have good stuff behind the scenes, they need to put together some good, consistent gameplay. Just a proper full section, 10-15 minutes. None of this little snippets here and there where you can't get a good feel. We need to kind of know what's going on if we are going to get pumped up enough to buy it. So I'll stay cautiously optimistic. I'm not excited right now. I'm giving the game a thumbs down for the moment, but I'm willing to have my mind changed. So we'll see what happens for the rest of the year. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.